Welcome back. Great to see everyone again and hope you are enjoying the learning so far. This is a juicy one. So grab your notebooks, grab a pen, put your phone away, and really focus in because this is going to be so useful for your journey. We are going to be talking about metabolism, energy, and fat burning. This applies to everyone, no matter what your weight. Now, we're always working by the philosophy that there are no quick fixes. When it comes to fat burning and weight loss, it seems like everyone is becoming an expert and everyone's kind of launching the latest diet, the latest fad that's out there, the hack, the quick fix, whatever it is. And we love that, right? We love something that promises something that's going to be easy. But what I'm here to remind you about is that quick fixes just don't work. Honestly, like if it was that easy, everyone would be doing it and everyone would have success. Um, this is going to take some time. It's going to take some strategy. It's going to take a little bit of work. But when you know what you need to do and you have the motivation to do it, you've got your why, things start to fall in place. And so let's dive in and figure out how your body works and how you're going to be able to set yourself up for success for your life. Now, this lesson is going to teach you about metabolism, the basics, how the body actually stores fat, how it burns it, and how we need to eat to fuel the body so that it's actually set up to lose weight in a healthy way without that feeling of deprivation or starving yourself. So we're going to bust a lot of myths here today. We are going to bust a lot of theories that you might believe that aren't actually true. Okay, so we're going to get really crystal clear on what you need to do for your body to be able to really fuel that fat burning. Now, we're going to be looking at how your body makes fat first. Okay, so look at body fat as literally just stored energy. So our bodies are primed to store extra glucose that we get from our food as fat so that when food is scarce, we can break it down and we can survive with that extra fuel. So you just want to think about animals, for example, how they sometimes fatten up in the summer so that they can have extra fuel or stores to help them throughout the winter when food is sometimes scarce. Well, we're designed the same way, and we want to keep that in mind, okay? So when we eat, the glucose in our food is carried by the hormone called insulin into our cells. So I like to use an analogy of a lock and key. So the cell is the lock, and the insulin is like the key that opens up the cell to let the glucose in. Okay, so remember this lock and key analogy. It's really important. All right, so the insulin gets released into the blood, and then it has to get into the cell to be effective, right? Now, the cells can only handle a certain amount of glucose. So what will happen is the excess gets stored as glycogen, okay? And it gets stored as glycogen in the liver for future use. Now, we only have small storage tanks for that glycogen. So that excess gets stored as fat, okay? So that excess that isn't needed in the liver will get stored in your fat cells. Now, the thing is about fat cells is they can get big. They can get as big as they need to get. They will expand. Now, you have a certain number of fat cells for your life, and they will just continue to expand or contract based on how you fuel your body. Now, our body does this through really key hormones. And so it's really important to understand what these hormones are and how they work in your body. So the first hormone we're going to look at is insulin. You may not have looked at insulin as a hormone, but it actually is a hormone. And it's actually it's the master fat storage hormone. So when we overeat, especially things like flour products and sugar, insulin will promote that fat storage and basically impairs that fat loss. So if you're overweight, you're always very likely insulin resistant, which causes other hormones to go haywire. What is insulin resistant? Well, back to that lock and key scenario. This is where the key mechanism, the insulin's trying to get into the cell, but that lock is jammed up. It's not letting it in anymore, okay? So if you think of it that way, sometimes the cell will not get what it needs. It will not get that glucose with the support of the insulin. And with that, you're not going to feel as energized, right? You might feel like you're lacking energy because the glucose is not getting into the cell. That's insulin. The second hormone you're going to want to know about is something called ghrelin. And this is considered our hunger hormone, and it stimulates our appetite. In someone who is at a healthy weight, ghrelin increases before a meal and decreases up to 30 minutes after you've eaten. So that's why people always tell you that you want to wait at least 20 to 30 minutes after eating to decide whether you're full or hungry still. Now, the trouble is when you're overweight, when you have, larger fat cells, then it sort of messes up the signaling and actually makes you feel hungrier. Okay. So the next hormone you want to get to know is called leptin. Is the satiety hormone that tells your brain you're full. Now, excess fat tissue causes leptin resistance so that there's no signal telling you to stop eating. All right. So that's when we have too much fat tissue. Your brain thinks you're starving, right, all the time. And so you sometimes feel hungry. Now, this can be a symptom of too much fat. Keep that in mind. Our cues are a little bit off when we are carrying a little bit of extra weight. Now, here's the catch. Like, typical Western diet is designed to make you want to eat more. There are chemical engineers on task to design processed foods to make you want to eat more, right? So they're loaded with sugar, they're loaded with flour, and they encourage elevated insulin levels. Remember, our fat hormone. So you have this master fat storage hormone floating around in your blood, making you store more and more and more fat. And it really, down the road, stops you from burning your fat as fuel. Okay. Now, even if the food you are eating is healthy, if you're eating too much of it, or you're eating in a pattern that encourages insulin secretion, for example, if you're eating something that's too high glycemic, like a bowl of cereal with milk on it and some berries, that's way too high glycemic. And that will encourage insulin secretion because glucose goes up, body releases insulin to grab that glucose, try to get it into the cells. You might be insulin resistant. Body's not going to let the glucose into the cells. So where does that glucose go? It has to get deposited in the liver. The liver's probably already tapped out and full. And so it goes into fat cells. Okay, so do you get the idea? Now, an elevated insulin causes also all the other hormones to go haywire. So really, it's this hormonal response to food that is causing you to keep the weight on and not be able to burn it, no matter how much exercise you're doing. So if you're taking the approach of exercising more, this is why it's not working. This is more about your hormone balance than it is about your lack of exercise. All right. Now, it does come into play indirectly, which I'll get to in a minute. But let's take a look at some of the myths. Now, one of the myths, the first ones, is fat makes you fat. Like if you grew up in I think it was the 80s, it was all about like, oh my gosh, avoid fat, and everything was high sugar, and oh my gosh. So we were sort of led to believe this, that fat makes you fat, and we steered clear of it. With drastic results. A lot of people ended up depressed and anxious and very low energy. So generally speaking, healthy fats are not what drives weight gain, you guys. It's not fats that make you fat. It's sugar and too many carbs and eating processed foods that make you fat. So eating low fat foods are actually worse for you. They tend to be higher in sugar. Like they have to make, if you look at yogurt, for example, if you're taking the fat out of yogurt to make it taste good, manufacturers will add more sugar to it. And so a lot of these low fat products are really, really high in sugar. Okay, so it's actually doing the opposite of what we want it to do, because that higher sugar, again, spikes your blood glucose, spikes your insulin, and then that whole cycle with the hormones continues. Now, fat is really, really important when it comes to healthy hormones and neurotransmitters, and even for just feeling full, right? And not always wanting to snack to kind of fill in that gap. Like if you leave a meal and you're sort of hungry within like an hour and a half to 2 hours later, it's probably because you didn't have enough fat or you didn't have enough protein in that meal. It was too high glycemic. And then what happens again? The sugar goes into your blood, insulin tries to get in the cell. And then when it pulls it into the cell, it drops in your blood. And then your body's like, oh, I need a cookie. I need to eat something to get my blood glucose levels back up. So do you get the idea? All right. So also fat helps to absorb soluble vitamins like vitamin A, D, E, and K. So those are fat soluble vitamins. Okay. Meaning that to get them into the cells, you need to have them with fat. Think about that. That's vitamin D. How important is vitamin D? So if you're going to have a salad, for example, you don't want to have just the salad with no dressing. You want to have the salad with a little bit of healthy fat on it, whether it's a handful of nuts and seeds, some extra olive oil, or some avocado. That would be a really great addition to a salad to ensure that you're absorbing all of those fat soluble vitamins. Now, healthy fats, the ones that we do need, are found in foods like nuts and seeds, like I mentioned, extra virgin olive oil. Coconut oil is also one that I love for people. It revs up your metabolism and it really helps you to burn fuel. It has fuel and does not get stored as fat. Any type of oily fish like sardines and mackerel, that is fantastic for, especially when you're in menopause. Organic ghee is great as well. That's like it's like a butter where they sort of boil a layer of the fat off and you're left with what they call ghee. And so some people really like that. And butter, I prefer grass-fed butter for a cleaner variety. Avocado is fantastic, and lots of choices there. Now, fats you want to avoid, this is where the problem is, right? So the problem comes from processed oils, and we learned about them in the last module. Vegetable oils, canola oils, and trans fats. So yes, we're onto it with the trans fats. There's a lot of labels, on our food saying no trans fats. So that's amazing. But what's not as obvious are the vegetable fats, the vegetable oils. People still believe those to be healthy, or we also refer to them as seed oils. Those are not healthy. They're very, very highly processed, and they contain things like genetically modified ingredients. And those are definitely ones you want to steer clear of, right? One thing that people often make a mistake with is hummus. Like a lot of people like to eat hummus when they're trying to get healthy, but you'll notice that a lot of hummuses on the market contain canola oil, and probably it's also very highly processed. Okay, so we'll go on to the next myth. The next myth is that you need to starve yourself. Now, we all kind of know this in theory, but we all kind of do it. A lot of my clients still do it. So know that skipping meals or under eating or starving yourself is the worst thing you can do. It causes the body to go into a stress response, and this leads to increased blood sugar. So you might not realize that. Some of my clients who are a little bit more stubborn, and they admit to be, we actually get them a glucose monitor, and they start to see that. They start to see that when the body goes into stress, they'll see their blood glucose go up, right? And that goes up generally with a cortisol spike. Now, that's something to really pay attention to. So if you are a little bit stubborn and you feel like you just, you've got it in your mind that intermittent fasting is the best thing for you, I would challenge you to get a glucose monitor and just have a look and see what it's doing to your blood glucose levels, right? It's not the best approach for everyone. So our hormones are basically going to also create this whole other cascade. The stress hormones will create this whole other cascade with our reproductive hormones. So we don't want that as well. Now, this whole process leads to elevated insulin, right? And guess what? It causes us to store more fat and blocks us from burning it. So the diet mindset can lead us to cycle through disordered eating and becoming more and more frustrated. Okay, we need to eat. And you guys, skipping meals, having a coffee for lunch does not count. Having some vegetables with hummus for lunch does not count as a meal. Okay, we learned about portions. We learned about what you need for a meal. You really have to make sure that you're fueling yourself with enough food, and be really honest with yourself here. You really want to be honest and take a look at what you're actually nourishing yourself with. Not what you know and you think you should be, but what you're actually nourishing yourself with, right? When life gets busy. So the next myth is that you need to exercise like a demon, right? You need to go big. You need to do all the things to try to burn off that extra fat. Now, again, this really comes down to putting the body into a state of stress, right? And when we're in stress, when our body perceives itself to be in a state of stress, what it will do, again, is it will increase the insulin levels, okay? So for fat burning, it's really important to get your food right so that it keeps insulin levels normal and then keeps exercise to a sensible level. Okay, so we're going to talk more about the best type of exercise later on, like in the last session. However, I just want you to know, just kind of planting a seed now, that muscle mass is a huge secret that you don't want to overlook. Okay, the next myth. So the next myth is that once you're a certain age, you can't lose weight, right? So oftentimes this happens like after 40, and there's just this belief that, oh, well, everyone gains weight, that typical 10 pounds, 20 pounds, because of the age. Well, while it can get a little bit more difficult because insulin resistance is actually a biological fact for women, your body does become a little bit more insulin resistant, meaning those cells, right? They're not listening to the insulin anymore and allowing the glucose in as easily. So you have to do a little bit more work, be a little bit more strategic to address that, as well as the decreasing muscle mass that's happening naturally for you after the age of 35. So, yes, changes in hormones can be a factor, but it doesn't mean that you can't lose weight. It absolutely is possible to lose weight. You just need to, again, be a little bit more strategic with how you do it. And you're learning that right now. So, okay, so let's take a look at what can slow your metabolism. So, again, not everyone's here to lose weight, but if weight loss is something that you're looking to do, you really want to pay attention to your metabolism. So, it can be slow. Sometimes people will be stuck in what we call a slow oxidizer pattern. And that just really means that when you're eating certain types of foods, your body is not able to utilize the nutrition as effectively, and it sort of burns a little slower and like through your nutrition a little slower. So your metabolism is basically, let's kind of backstep a little bit in terms of understanding metabolism. Metabolism includes all the biochemical reactions in your body that actually uses key nutrients and oxygen to create energy in you. Okay, that's really what metabolism is. So there are many factors that affect whether you have a fast metabolism or a slower metabolism. So we're going to take a look at some of those things so that you can better understand what your rate is. I mean, we all have an example, right? We all have that friend that could eat anything when they were younger and they would never put on weight. They had fast metabolisms, and so there is a little bit of a genetic component there, but we're going to talk about the stuff that you can control when it comes to metabolism. So don't worry about that. Just know that the old adage, calories in, calories out, it's just not it's just not true. Okay. It's actually a little bit more complicated. So I'm just going to focus on a couple of things to help make sense of this for you. Now, one of the most common things for a slow metabolism is that I see in my practice a lot is having issues with your thyroid hormone. And our doctors typically just ask when they look into your thyroid, they usually just look at your TSH numbers, which isn't actually the best measure for thyroid health. So we want to look at some other factors. We want to look at, you might have low free T4 levels or poor conversion of T4 to T3 or too much reverse T3. So if you don't know what all those numbers are, it's hard to know what your body is doing and where the issues are with that, with those hormones, the thyroid hormones. So basically a history of dieting is probably one of the causes of your slow metabolism in this sense as well. Okay, so it's either the thyroid piece, a history of dieting, which again trains your body to shift into that low metabolism to be able to survive for longer periods of time. Also, what weighs into this is your size and your body composition, right? So people who have more fat and less muscle tend to have slower metabolisms, okay? And people with opposite, if you have more muscle mass, so there's some people who have like a kind of a stockier build, and they may have faster metabolisms because of that larger muscle mass. And then also the fourth thing is your activity level, okay? But also your lack of sleep and potentially nutritional deficiencies. And I actually see that a lot. But if you are walking around super depleted in nutrition, and I usually say when you are carrying extra weight, you are typically nutrient deficient. And that's why you're eating more, because you're trying to find the missing minerals and vitamins. So you keep eating to try to fill in those gaps. But if you're eating processed foods, you never really get what you need, right? You're always getting the wrong balance of nutrients. So you never feel satiated. So again, that's why it's so important to get more real food into your diet. So you're getting some of those missing minerals and vitamins. Now, we'll briefly touch on each one below, and I promise to give you better advice than just to eat less and exercise more based on what we just talked about. Now, Again, your thyroid is, well, we didn't really talk about this, but your thyroid is like the master controller of your metabolism, just in case you didn't know, right? So your thyroid glands kind of sits here. And just know that when it produces fewer hormones, your metabolism slows down. So the thyroid hormones I mentioned earlier, I mentioned T3 and T4, and those are responsible for telling the cells in your body when to use more energy and become more metabolically active, right? So you can imagine if you're low in T3 or T4, or something's up with the conversion, you might have a slower metabolism. So these really just work together to keep your metabolism just right. And know that there are several things that can throw it off, right? So things like autoimmune disease or mineral deficiencies. Like I said before, I see a ton of iodine and selenium deficiencies. And then also chronic stress. Know that whenever the adrenal glands are off, you're typically going to see the thyroid off. And vice versa. If the thyroid's off, typically the adrenal glands are off. So chronic stress always has to be addressed no matter what your health issue. Now, it is well worth getting your thyroid tested. If you're working with me, we've probably already done that, or we will do that. But we need more than your TSH. We need to look at those hormones I mentioned, the TSH, the free T4, free T3, and reverse T3 to really get some better insight. And then I also recommend that checking your antibodies as well. Okay. And you can also consider a mineral lab for a full picture. And I do that as well on the side for anyone interested. Now, also, we talked about the history of dieting, so that also lowers your metabolic rate. So we'll just talk a little bit about that. So if you do have a history of dieting or restriction, it does often show your metabolic rate. It slows it down over the years, right? This is because the body senses that food may be scarce. Like you've sort of trained your body to think and be ready for those time periods of less food. And so it just sort of adapts to that. And so it learns how to do okay with very little food. And that's why you always hear that you shouldn't diet. Dieting's the worst thing you can do. So if you have heard that, this is why metabolically it kind of wrecks your metabolism. But you can change this. Don't worry, you can change this. Again, so while muscle mass is going to be a really big piece to changing this, to really improving your metabolism or your metabolic rate. Now, this is why people often put more weight on after going on a diet, right? Again, it's just a change. It's like the flip-flopping. It's like back and forth and back and forth. And your body gets confused and doesn't know what to do with it. So one of the key things you really want to do here is just making sure that you fuel your body without overdoing it. So never skip meals and really just work on that belief set that skipping meals is your answer. It's not the answer. We need to get 3 meals a day and enough food to fuel that metabolism. If you're skipping meals, you're not fueling your metabolism, you're slowing it down. So again, that's the worst thing you can do is skipping meals. Now, again, back to the body size and body composition. So again, in general, larger people have faster metabolic rates. This is because it takes more energy to fuel a larger body than a smaller one, right? That kind of makes sense. However, your body composition is a really important factor here, as 2 people who weigh the same can have very different metabolisms. Like that friend example I gave you, we all had that one friend, right? Someone with more muscle mass is going to have a higher metabolic rate than someone who has more fat mass, right? There's also something where, there's some people genetically who don't break down fats as well in their diet, right? So that could be playing into their metabolism as well. Now, the final piece, again, we're diving a little bit more deeply into is the fact that your muscles that actively move and do work, they need energy, right? So even muscles at rest burn more calories than fat. And this is why that strength training, that building your muscle mass is going to be really key if you want to move this along faster, okay? So this means that the amount of energy your body uses depends partly on the amount of lean muscle mass you have, all right? This is huge for metabolic health. So doing weight training is really, really going to help you with this, because then you're burning calories while you're just sitting there. I love that idea. Okay, so I always tell my clients to focus on building the big muscle groups first. You're going to get more bang for your buck. So think, your quads, your bums, your thighs. Those are the best places to start. And again, we can slowly start to increase your activity level as well. Now, Aerobic exercise temporarily increases your metabolic rate. So that's a good thing, right? That's the best time to eat, actually, is after a workout, just within half an hour, because your body is really burning your full fuel pretty quickly. Now, even little things can add up throughout the day and are really important to your metabolism. So think of those things like if you're going to the mall, park at the end of the parking lot so you can walk in a little bit further. You can get a stand up desk or get one of those blow up balls. I don't remember what they're called, those exercise balls that you can sit at your desk with. Sometimes I'll just get up and I'll do some squats while I'm working. You can take the stairs. Like our whole family, we never take elevators. We always take the stairs because we can. We always say that. Dave's an osteopath. He treats hurt people all day long. So we are super appreciative of having bodies that work. And so we do stuff like that. We take stairs, we hike all the time. And we really try to just figure those little things out. So for me, like I keep my large water bottle downstairs because I have my office upstairs. And so whenever I have to fill up my glass of water, I force myself to run downstairs, fill up my water there, come back upstairs. So just doing little things like that can really have a powerful impact on improving your activity level. Okay. So it's not hard to do, but do try to build in some resistance training as well with this movement, this cardio movement. Now, also know that a lack of sleep is definitely going to have an impact on your metabolic rate as well. So, the general consensus is you try to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night. And again, the hours before midnight are the most powerful for hormone health. So, just try to create a really good routine. This is really what it's all about, is try to get a routine where you fall asleep at a certain period of time. And I've got a handout for you that you can read through, and it's going to give you lots of tips on how to really improve your sleep. Now, there are so many other nutritional factors that play into metabolism as well. Quality of the food, how it is prepared, and also how well our digestive system can absorb it all matter. So for the purpose of this lesson, let's just take a look at the main micronutrients that help our body to create energy and fire our metabolism. And they are, ready for this, your B vitamins, magnesium, CoQ10, iodine, and selenium, so for your thyroid, and iron. Okay, those are all really, really important when it comes to energy, B12 specifically. And just as an example, you'll see here how important chromium and magnesium is. Now, there's an interesting book written by Dr. Frank Schallenberger. He did some interesting research that found that there is a link with type 2 diabetes and insufficient magnesium and chromium. So again, nutrition matters. Nutrition matters so much, okay? All of these principles here, they will help balance insulin and fix those haywire hormones. You guys, this really works. Just follow the plan. So what are we going to do? So let's review some of our principles that we did learn, but we're going to review them again. Number one, eat 3 balanced meals a day. You don't need snacks, okay? Unless you're breastfeeding, unless you're a teenager, pregnant, then you can have snacks, but generally you don't really need snacks. You have to leave space in between your meals to get proper digestion happening. And also for your insulin levels to normalize. They need time, right? They need time to normalize and then burn through that fat, right? That excess fat. If you're eating too soon, it's not going to burn the fat, right? It's just going to burn the next thing you feed it, right? So we have to leave that space. We have to leave that large gap with enough time to be able to start burning at those fat cells. Okay, so eating every 2 to 3 hours, as I mentioned, it's just going to keep burning what you feed it. It's not going to get to that fat, which is what we need to do. Number 2, make sure you're getting protein with every meal. So we've learned this. Protein helps us feel satiated and slows the release of glucose into our blood. So, and thereby it controls insulin. So I'm going to give you a sample actually. You're better off having like a piece of chicken with fat to decrease that peak, right? If you're just having chicken, it's still going to rise a little bit. So protein on its own is not the best solution. It's good. It's not the best. You always want to have the protein and the fats and the vegetables if you can. Okay. So it really does help. This is a key habit for people who want to lose weight. Okay. And it will reduce cravings as well. Usually when you crave sugar, the first thing I do with my clients is we go back and we look at protein intake. Because A, the person is either not getting enough protein, or B, they're not digesting it well enough. Okay, so those are two things you'll want to look at in your own diet if you're craving sugar. Now, number three is ditch the diet mentality. I know we've brought this up a few times, but it is that important because this is a sneaky one, right? It's hidden there. We don't even realize we have this mindset. But having a diet mentality can lead to cycles of deprivation, binging, and feeling inadequate. And a lot of it, it's so ingrained in us, we don't even notice we're doing it, right? So my thing, what I would be tended to do is I would have coffee instead. I didn't realize I was doing it, but when I was like feeling a bit hungry, I would go grab a coffee, feeling like I could delay my hunger a little bit. And that wasn't the best thing because I wasn't eating enough lunch. I find women really struggle with lunch. So you have to be have a good plan for your meals. Now, again, for healthy, sustained weight loss, you need to switch your mindset. You really, really do. You have to stop that dieting. There's no beginning and end. This is just a lifestyle change that you're going to implement 80-20, right? Or 90-10 if you're a perfectionist. If you focus on nourishing your body and building healthy habits and creating long-term lifestyle change, this is where you're going to start to succeed. Okay. Yes, you will likely have to make changes. It's the way you approach these changes that matter, though. This is really, really important, going to it with a very positive mindset. So instead of, oh, I can't eat that, I can't have this, I'm not allowed for that, this is bad. No, we want to reframe this. I choose to fuel my body in a way that feels good to me. I am choosing to have this so that I feel satiated. So it's your choice. And I get to try some new vegetables. I get to try a new way of fueling myself at lunch. So really start to change your language. The power of words is really important, right? So we want to start talking about this in a very positive way. This is abundance, right? We get abundant selection of foods now that we're really focusing on nourishment and strength and power and not weight loss. Like it's not about that. It's not about what we don't get. It's about what we do get. Okay. It feels so much more empowering when you look at it that way. Number four. So again, we've talked about this. Eat nutrient dense whole foods. Again, this is going to fill you up. This is going to satisfy those cravings you have. We have, we crave different tastes and flavors, bitter, sweet, sour, salty. We need all of that. And we need the right macros. We need the right amount of protein, fat, vegetables, fruits. You get the idea. Again, an apple and a chocolate bar are just not the same, right? They're just not the same. So really think about your choices when you nourish yourself. A little trick that I do is, sometimes if I'm craving the chocolate, I'll just have the chocolate because did you ever find yourself where you're like, oh my God, I love this chocolate? And then so you'll eat the apple and then you'll eat some grapes and then you'll eat this and then that, but you never really get what you want. Sometimes you just need to have the chocolate. Often if you're craving chocolate, you're craving magnesium. And so what I would say is just get some 70% beautiful dark chocolate and have that first and see if that kind of satisfies your craving. There's that approach. But for other people, if you're craving something, I would say have some water. If you're craving chips, have some water with a little bit of sea salt in it because odds are it's your adrenal glands. Your adrenal glands are tapped out and they need more sodium, but healthy sodium in the form of sea salt that includes a number of other minerals as well. We've got a really great one, Aussie Trace Minerals, available if you want to grab that. Love it. When you're craving salt, you put that in water, drink it in the afternoon. Amazing. Okay, so there's lots of little tips and tricks you can do to make sure that you're eating whole foods first and you're addressing those cravings. Eventually, you're not going to crave junky foods. You're only going to crave good foods, and that's when you know you've made it. You've managed to balance those glucose and insulin levels really well. And this is really key. Like, love yourself now. Okay, stop falling into the trap of like when I'm going to, right? That never comes. Like life is now, right? We want to feel good about ourselves now. So if you're hanging on to clothes that don't fit you anymore, get rid of them. Like just say goodbye to them. That is a heavy weight of stress sitting there in your closet. Look at it differently. Like I'm going to get rid of these now and I'm just going to feel good now. I'm going to buy clothes right now that I feel amazing in. Like we all know we've been there. I know I put on a pair of pants. If they feel too tight, I have a shitty day. So what I do now is I make sure that I put on clothes that feel really good on my body right now. So I'm not tempted to fuel in the wrong ways, right? And then we want to start shifting that mindset to say, I'm grateful that my body is strong, nourished, and healthy. You fill in the blanks. You can put whatever words in there you need to hear. But this is really important. And you can do tapping. If you've never done tapping, I can teach that in another session. But that's really great to kind of anchor some of those beliefs into your system. All right. This wraps up the section on metabolism. Again, I hope that you understood everything I talked about. And if you don't worry, we're going to bring it back in a bunch of other sessions to make sure that you're understanding exactly what to do. And now make sure you head over to your handout. There's tons of information there as well. And I will see you in the next lesson. Chat soon.